It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our provost here at the University of Delaware, Domenico Grasso. Before coming to UD, Dr. Grasso served as Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate College of the University of Vermont. It was there that he earlier served as the Dean of the College of Engineering and Mathematical Sciences. Previously, he was the Rosemary Bradford Hewlett Professor at Smith College, one of the nation's most prestigious women's colleges, and was the founding director of its engineering program. Provost Grasso has been a key supporter of the UD Advanced Institute. Members of our advanced team meet with him biweekly. He serves as the chair of our internal advisory board and consistently messages the faculty and university community at large about advanced initiatives. We appreciate the support he has given to us both at large and regarding this conference. So please help me welcome Provost Domenico Grasso.
Thank you very much, Emily. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning, especially because one of my most influential and significant role models in my career was a woman of color in the academy, Ruth Simmons, who years ago, when she was president of Smith College, talked me out of a position at an Ivy League school to go to Smith and start the engineering program there, something that I will never regret and has been incredibly influential in my life. We're very excited, of course, to host this conference, and we're very glad that you could all be here with us. As Emily mentioned, I and all of us at the university are absolutely committed to improving gender and racial diversity in the faculty here at UD and throughout the academy. And it's conferences like this one and around the country where people help think about and guide decisions that are going to change the complexion of the academy. What's important is that we all benefit, professors, researchers, administrators, and even provosts, and maybe especially provosts, from the wide range of opinions and perspectives that a diverse faculty bring to the academy. Of course, that diversity doesn't happen through magic. We have to make it happen through our decisions and through our policies. The culture we create and nurture on our campus is so important to making this a reality. If it were easy, if the path to a diverse faculty was straightforward and clear, then we would have followed it by now. And of course, there'd be no reason for a conference like this. But it's not straightforward and it's not clear. Earlier this week, NPR ran a story about the candidates in this very contentious campaign season. And they said in this story, using a metaphor, that each candidate, if they were going to see themselves on the ballot in November, would have to win their lanes, that they would have to be excellent in what they were proposing, whether it was establishment, disestablishment, or whatever they were proposing. They would have to win their lanes. It's a great metaphor. But the idea that a candidate can follow just a single path and win essentially the final election is not a true statement. And it's not true either for us as well. In reality, we know that a journey, whether metaphoric or real, is filled with detours, delays, mishaps, unscheduled stops. So to say that you're just going to win your lane and think that it's a straight shot down that path is just not going to happen. Navigating this process of recruiting, retaining, and advancing faculty, women of color, doesn't come with easy-to-follow directions. And the path for one institution probably won't be successful for other institutions. So we hope you'll think of this conference more as a GPS to help guide your journey. Better yet, it's like an app, the Waze app that you may be familiar with, because that gives you directions based on experiences and feedbacks from other drivers. So this is what this is here for, is for you to learn from other drivers on that road to success. We all have essential roles to play to make our institutions more diverse, and the University of Delaware is very proud to contribute to this effort through our Advanced Institute and all the wonderful work that the individuals that are working so hard in that are doing. I hope that you learn a lot this weekend and that you can take a lot back to your institutions. I'm certain that we at UD are going to learn a lot as well. So now I'd like to help us get started in earnest by introducing our this morning's keynote speaker, Dr. Karen Watson. Dr. Watson has served as provost provost at Texas A&M. It's probably pronounced differently down there, is it?
You're talking way too fast.
Provost at Texas A&M since 2009, which in and of itself is an incredibly remarkable accomplishment, because I think that that is twice as long as the average lifespan of a provost in the United States. She joined the faculty at A&M in 1983 and is currently the Regents Professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering and in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. She has held several administrative posts, including serving twice as the interim vice president and associate provost for diversity. Dr. Watson has received many awards for her teaching and her scholarship, including the U.S. President's Award for mentoring minorities and women in science and technology. Her dedicated service to the field of engineering and to the academy makes her an ideal speaker to open today's session. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Karen Watson.
Thank you, Domenico. So, I'm not a woman of color. You might not have picked that up. And I say that a little bit in jest, but a little bit because everybody assumes they know who you are, often just by looking at you. And we know that's not true, but we know that it happens on a regular basis. So I thought it was interesting that for this very important topic, I was asked to keynote. By the way, I'll say something about my introduction. One of those departments, even though I had a courtesy joint appointment, never really embraced me till I became provost. Then all of a sudden they were upset that I wasn't listing them as a faculty member. But before I became provost, they never worried about whether I was on their list or not. And so part of what I'm going to talk about today, I hope, gives you some insight from a provost perspective about how I think we are going to accomplish the changes we are trying to change. But also part of what I'm going to talk about today is power, because we often don't talk about the power in the room, okay? I had the pleasure of walking over here with some of the people on the conference, and they said it's really interesting to be a white woman and be in an arena where you're the minority, because we don't have that experience enough. Now, those of us in STEM have the experience often of being one of the few women who are in an arena, but we don't have that experience that many of you have, that it's not just about the professional field, but when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the supermarket, when you're at any retailer, when you're driving on the highway and stuff, there's a different experience in how people look at you and act like they know you or something about you when they don't have any idea about who you are and what you are. One word of warning, okay? You may listen to me today and say she's not very realistic. The people who know me know I'm very pragmatic, but I'm an eternal optimist, okay? I am optimistic that idiots won't rule the world forever, okay? Although this presidential campaign is not reinforcing my optimism, but that's okay, I'm not going to give up on it. John Galsworthy said, "Idealism increases in direct proportion to one's distance from the problem." So I think if you don't know me, you may hear some of the things that I say today and say, yeah, she can say that as a woman who has white privilege and works in academia. And so she's sounding very idealistic on some things. I will try to assure you that I understand there's a lot of pragmatism and idealism, although we can describe it and think about what it would look like for faculty of color, women faculty, and we're not there. And it's easy when you're in a provost position to say, well, this is how it's going to work. We're going to get there, and here's how we're going to get there. And we know that idealism is not going to happen, as Domenico said, it's not going to happen this way everywhere, and it's not going at the pace any of us want it to happen. So, but I do think it's important for us to think about why it is important to be an optimist. Okay? So Dennis Charney did some research, and Dennis did research on a group that had every reason not to have survived. These were Vietnam War prisoners, okay, who came through better than many people who were never in prison. These people, these men, survived 7 or more years in traumatic situation. And they were incredibly resilient, not only to survive that time, but when they came back to society, they were incredibly resilient. Now, there is a truth in his study that these are the survivors, okay? So they had already, many people didn't survive. So these were the survivors. And so he studied the characteristics of these survivors who were so resilient no matter what had happened to them. The number one characteristic was optimism. And number 2 was altruism. And so I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind. It is absolutely okay to vent, to talk about the negative things, to have circles of people that we can talk about the negative thing. But the more you dwell on the negative things, it turns out, psychologists tell us, the less resilient you are. So you have to be careful as we come here, and we have to be realistic and talk about the problems, that you got to turn to this optimism of what we're going to do about it, not drowned, and I'm going to talk more about that, in what's still wrong. I love my father. My father one time not too long ago said, women have come so far, so why aren't they happier? And, you know, and they had in his lifetime. And I was like, but Dad, you know, we're of the faith that we have one lifetime, not 100. And so why am I going to spend my lifetime behind just being happy that we've come so far and we haven't gotten there? Another study I think is important was done by Suzanne Segerstrom. And one of the things said about her work is that if you are naturally an Eeyore, then fake optimism, okay? Because people who are optimistic are more committed to their goals, are more successful in achieving their goals, are more satisfied with their lives, and have better mental and physical health when compared to pessimistic people, okay? So the groundwork here is, no matter how serious and bad this still is, with no explanation of why we're still dealing in 2016 with things that should have been fixed hundreds of years ago, but certainly should have been fixed by the 70s, okay? That reality could make us be very pessimistic, but it won't help us achieve what we need to do if we stay in that reality and that pessimism. So, for your own resilience, for your organization's resilience, for your students' resilience, then you have to be sure that you are telling them about the barriers, but you're not letting them getting overwhelmed by the barriers. And so I want to say that to you as well, okay? I want to say to you that what I can say looking into the future is I can guarantee you 100% your career as a faculty member is not going to be fair. But I am an optimist, and I believe that justice is possible. Now, many of us interchange those words, fairness with justice, and it's okay if you do that. But let me explain what I'm saying and what's different about fairness. Fairness to me would be the absence of discrimination, the absence of unwarranted barriers. I was looking at somebody else's study. I'm trying to look at her name right now. Gloria Thomas and Carol Hollinshead studied organizations, and you know, they found that women of color said there's barriers in the organization to their thriving, meaning they didn't ask what exactly, barriers to what, advancement, just being happy, what, but women of color said 80% of the time there's barriers in their organization. That kind of surprised me that it was only 80%, okay? But white women said it only 45% of the time. We forget that, those of us in this room, that the double bind, sometimes triple and more, for women of color just escalates what they're having to deal with over what we are having to deal with. By the way, men of color in that same study said barriers were there 35% of the time, and white men said 30% of the time, okay? So you have to look at the fact that these kinds of studies, and these kinds of studies have been repeated over and over again, but we don't seem to raise our real understanding or sensitivity to these facts. The fact that we're all having to deal with something, some of us more than others, okay, but that the women of color are almost guaranteed to have that compounded on what they have to deal with. And you can imagine, you've seen these metaphors before and stuff like that. If I'm running a race and you give me in a 100-yard dash a 40-yard head start, why is it fair that at the end of the race I just see how much time it took us? How is that meritocracy working? If I give you even a small sack that you have to carry in the race, just 10 pounds that you have to carry in the race that I don't have to carry in the race, how is it fair when we get to the finish line that I'm measured by my time, and you who had to carry these other or get through other barriers, think of it another way, I get to run with no hurdles in my path, you get 3 hurdles in the path as you go along. Not an infinite number of hurdles, but 3. They may not even be high hurdles, but they're there, okay? How is the meritocracy fair that measures us at the end for how many publications you had, how many citations you had, how many grant dollars you got, whatever the measure for faculty is? So it's not going to be fair, okay? But can it be just? Well, if justice is, we would like justice to be completely fair, but if justice means the system in place, biased as it may be, is executed with equity, then justice is possible, okay? So in my career, justice has happened. I have run into many unfairness. Yes, I am a white woman. Many of you know this, but I'm also a lesbian. So picture yourself in College Station, Texas, okay? One of the most conservative university campuses, maybe rivaling Delaware, I'm not sure, in the United States. Okay? And I have spent my career as a faculty member there since '83. People got past the idea that I had a roommate some time ago, okay? Nance has been my partner, and we are married, and she's been my partner for over 30 years. So people figured it out, okay? And we're doing fine in College Station, Texas. Because one of the things that we know is when people know you, then they come to terms with other identity things. Now, we do get the things that many of you of color get. This is my ex-friend. You know, people like to brag, I have a lesbian friend right here, you know, and you're like, okay. Yeah, I represent all of them, all over the world, you know, right here with you right now. The advantage of this identity element for me is it is invisible, okay? You may, you know, people think they have a gaydar, okay, and they could tell when they see me that I must be, but usually I have to confirm for people this part of my identity. All of you have multiple parts of your identity, some of which line up very well with what is expected in your career and what you have as your goals. Some of them don't line up so well with those identity elements that you have. I mean, we can talk about all the unfair experiences. I could talk about walking into a class to substitute lecture for somebody. They assume that I'm the secretary and that class is dismissed. Okay? I can talk about how many times, even today as provost, people will say, here is President so-and-so, here is Provost so-and-so, and here is Karen. Okay? And on the one hand, that makes me kind of smile because they're comfortable. On the other hand, it's like, why do we have to use titles for everybody else, but we forget them? And you can see it. It happens a lot to people of color and to women, more than it typically happens to white men or even Asian men. It does happen a lot to Asian women. So what do I mean by justice? Okay? I'm provost. Okay? There is a justice in that. I worked hard. Nobody handed it to me. I had all these unfair things happen to me. Okay? But I was the only woman so often people knew me. So the justice side of these is while many white men of similar rank to me were striving to get somebody to notice them, they were always noticing me. Okay? Now that created scrutiny and I didn't always behave well. Okay? But nonetheless, the justice was the disadvantage and the advantages have worked out to give me a very happy career, an opportunity to do what I value most, and what I value most is not being rich, but is being respected and having influence. And I get to do that. And so I feel that my career shows that justice can happen. It's not guaranteed to happen, but it can happen. And one of the reasons I think justice has happened for me at Texas A&M University is because I'm an optimist. You know, so the idea of being angry, there are a lot of Texas A&M people here, and none of them can tell you they have never seen me angry. Okay? They have seen me angry. People know when I'm ticked off. Okay? Yeah, they're all going, yeah, we know that. Okay? It's not about never having anger. It's about how you live in that anger. Okay? So for me, optimism is a whole lot about, do people become afraid of you because they think you're inherently angry? Or do people come to respect you because they know when you are angry there was a reason? Okay? And so I would say to you, justice has happened for me because I laugh, because I have humor, because I'm optimistic. For those of you not from the South, let me explain to you what I explain to all northern women who come to Texas. This is very important. When you work in the South, I don't know how Delaware fits with this, but when you work in the South and you're a woman, then what you got to do is smile while you call him a son of a bitch. And it works. So it's important to understand the culture that you're in and what they expect of you. But it's also important to think about how you take things. I mean, we can be real dramatic. I have not had the negative experiences that some of you have had to deal with, and I recognize that. Viktor Frankl said, after spending years in a concentration camp, the only thing they can never take away is your choice of your own attitude. And so I think that women of color have had so many trials in their lives that they come with an incredibly deep strength if they haven't been overwhelmed by their anger. Justifiable anger, absolutely justifiable anger. But if that's what becomes their identity, they can't change the boat. And what I mean by boat, if you've read Meyerson's work on tempered radicals, is people who want to make change, but they want to stay in the system they're in. So what happens to men of color, and more often to women of color, is people think you want to blow the boat up because it's so broken. So how can they get behind your ideas because you're blowing their boat up? Okay? What they want is you to rock the boat, but not too much. What you want to do is rock it enough to see an actual change and not just more of the same. And finding that balance has to be something that you believe it's possible to change the environment you're in. An optimism in spite of data, that you believe it's possible to change it. And if you have that belief, then people will start to come of, yes, she's rocking the boat, but I don't think she's trying to sink it. Okay? Tell you quickly about a conversation I had with my deans. So we have been having monthly conversations. I meet with all the deans as a group twice a month. And we talk about diversity once a month. Okay? And one of the diversity conversations we had with all the deans was about implicit bias. Okay, they've all heard it, they've all been trained, they've all gone. Okay? So it was a robust conversation about what the different colleges are doing about implicit bias. And 100% of the deans talked about the training for search committees and an implicit bias in hiring. Had a nice, robust conversation about that. 30 minutes into this sharing of great ideas about what they're doing about implicit bias in their colleges for hiring, I said, and what are you doing about implicit bias in promotion and tenure? And of course, if you're talking about promotion and tenure, what are you doing about implicit bias in the annual reviews? And it stumped them. I have 7 out of my 17 deans, I have 7 women deans, 1 male, African-American male, and 1 Hispanic male. Okay? It stumped everybody. Because we've heard so much about implicit bias in hiring that these very smart people hasn't translated to a systemic approach as to how they're going to deal with it in the other areas, because it's really hard to figure out. It's hard to figure out in hiring, but there's a lot of work been done on that. But when I talk about annual evaluations, and some of them cock their heads, like a little puppy, like, what? And I was like, so we know student evaluations of teaching have bias in them. We know that. There's way too much literature to pretend it doesn't. Against people of color and against women. We know it. So what are you doing about that fact that a woman getting the same ranking as the man has taught better? And they're like, well, what do you think we should do? It's like, I don't know. This is something for you to figure out, because we don't want lower standards for certain people. We don't want people saying, yeah, they get tenure, but they didn't have to jump the same hurdle, because that creates another problem and another bias and stuff like that. But if you can think about it and do all kinds of training and in hiring, the most important thing is to make people aware of their implicit bias, then why aren't you just as passionate about every P&T committee and about every department head has to have this before they're allowed to do annual evaluations and things like that? So they're pondering that now. We'll see what happens. But it is interesting to me, as much work as we have done on a topic so that they were not unfamiliar with the topic of implicit bias, they hadn't translated it to anything except how the topic was presented to them. We would give our students a C or a D, for not being able to translate a topic to other arenas. So I told them I'm giving them a C or a D, and they didn't really care. Okay. So the last thing before I'd like to answer questions, I am not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, but I want to get back to this optimism thing, but I want to come at it a different way. How many of you have heard of the drama triangle? Karpman's drama triangle. So they use this in therapy. So pretend this is a giant therapy session, okay? In the drama triangle, this was work done in the 60s. There is a triangle, and the triangle goes like this, okay? And on one side, on the top here is a persecutor. Also on the top, on this other vertex of the triangle, is a rescuer. And down here at the bottom of the triangle is a victim. Okay? Now, I don't know if many of you have been in academia long, but academia is a drama. Okay? And there are many dysfunctional people in academia. Did you know in the United States, 7% of the population at any time is having a mental crisis? My bet is in academia we're higher. Okay? So look around your department. 1 out of 10 of them is having a mental crisis right now. A lot of this sucks us into this drama triangle. Okay? So if you are pictured as a victim, then people think they need to rescue you from some persecutor. Liberal whites, we are really bad at this. We think we're going to rescue the women of color. They don't need to be rescued. They need to not be put at the bottom of this pyramid. So stop being the rescuer, okay? Are there persecutors? Absolutely, there are persecutors. But they feel justified because somehow they've been shorted something. I have department heads who are absolutely certain, well, even in Texas, we're not allowed to shoot them, okay? Who are absolutely certain that they're being persecuted, thus it justifies any persecution they have because we talk about diversity so much. Because they're busy with the science, with the field, and this diversity talk is not helping them accomplish what they want. So they feel persecuted and then they turn around. And knowingly or unknowingly, they persecute. And then we have rescuers who come in, and then we have victims who are made to feel like they're victims even though they're not victims. And what you would like to do is say, I need everybody to stop this behavior. But what the research says about this triangle is that you just have to not get into it, no matter what everybody else is doing. Somebody coming to rescue you, you don't have to be rude to say, oh, no, don't think I need to be rescued. It may be something you just say to yourself. Somebody told me one time, I think it was Karen Butler, never fire your mentor, okay? Even if they're wrong, okay? You don't fire them. You don't get rude with them. You just don't take their advice. My mentor told me not to become an administrator, okay? He now says he was wrong, okay? But it wasn't that he was persecuting me. It's his plan and his way of doing his career. It was not the right time, okay? If I became a victim, took his advice, he had to rescue me from this, and that persecutors and rescuers cross over left and right. Not a bad or evil people, but I could have got on a triangle making him the rescuer and wouldn't have had the wonderful career I had. I listened to him, but I did not let him become my rescuer. Okay? So my point is, if you know who you are, now I'm not guaranteeing you that the drama triangle will stop. I'm not guaranteeing you the rescuers won't turn into persecutors when you're not behaving the way they thought you would behave and stuff like that. What I am guaranteeing you is you're not trapped. You have gone far too far with far too many skills. You may be temporarily confined because of your life situations and stuff like that, but you're not trapped. So you do not have to become the victim of their drama triangle. And as long as you remember that, then you're going to do great things, and justice, I'm optimistic, can and probably will prevail. Because your strengths will shine through. And if they won't shine through at this place, then you'll find the place where they will shine through. So, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.